right, so hi, I'm Sebastian. I'm in charge of the operator framework from the engineering side here at Red Hat. And Diane is absent today and left me in charge of moderating this. So this is going to be quite freeform. There was an agenda that where some people wanted to present their operators. I don't know if you're all here, but I would say if that's the case, if one of you had an operator to present, like for example the Jaeger operator, then I'd be happy to hear about it. All right. So first, let's hear from the Jaeger operator. That sounds like a fascinating topic.
Okay, right. So I hope that you can see my screen here. All right, so the Jaeger operator. So my name is Sebastian. I am a software engineer at Red Hat as well. I work on the Chiali project, specifically the distributed tracing team. It started at Uber to trace their couple thousand microservices, but right now it's currently being used in production by very different. Right. So if you don't know Jaeger, if you want to know more about Jaeger itself, the place you should start is Jaeger 3.
Good. So do interrupt me if I get muted again. I mean, this is Linux after all.
Yeah, I was checking on my side. So go ahead. I think it seems to be going fine now.
All right, cool. So so why do you need a cloud-native way of deploying Jaeger? Right. So we do have templates already for Kubernetes, for OpenShift, and we've been telling people just get our templates, change it to suit your needs, and that's fine, right? I mean, it should be easy. The thing is, people do not want to take our templates and change it, because even though we are quite comfortable with Kubernetes and all those primitives that Kubernetes talks about, like deployments and pods and whatnot, people are not that used to it. And they're looking for an easier way to deploy Jaeger in Kubernetes, in OpenShift, and so on. So the community came up with a Helm chart. And when we start, the Helm chart actually makes it easier for people to deploy Jaeger there. People can just add some, configuration switches, and it gets installed. Now, the thing is, so when we started thinking about building an operator, we thought, well, that's actually a good way to start. So we just take our chart, we use the Helm app operator kit, and we are done with it, right? But it's not that easy. I mean, our chart is not really a problem with the chart itself or with the Helm app operator kit. The problem is the way that Jaeger is deployed can be quite complex. And that is because Jaeger itself is built following a microservices architecture, meaning we have 3 or 4 components that can be executed individually, right? So we have the agent, we have the collector, we have the query, and they all have different audiences. So people running the collector probably want to, for people with a very high concurrency scenario, they probably want the collector to run on its own pod. And the query in another pod, because it's just for users to open the UI and see and look at traces. So if the query crashes, we don't want that to influence the collector. But then there are people who are quite happy to run everything on the same pod, right? Because, with the same binary. And that's not something that is very easy to accomplish with the Helm chart. It's doable, but it's not that easy. And it becomes quite messy, to be honest. And then we have different agent strategies. So the agent is the component that runs very close to the application, and it receives tracing information from the application and then sends data to a remote collector. Typically, the agent runs on the same machine as the application at localhost. But localhost is something that is not well defined in Kubernetes, right? I mean, it could be the node, the kubelet node, or it can be the pod. So localhost can be these two different things. And the right answer is what is localhost is actually both, right? I mean, if we are in a multi-tenant scenario, then we probably want the agent on the pod level. So localhost there is a pod. Whereas if we are on a single tenant mode and we don't care that much about security, we can save a few megabytes by deploying the agent as a demo set. And to complicate things a bit more, we have different storage backends. So we support in-memory, we support Elasticsearch, Cassandra, Kafka, and probably more to come. So as you can imagine, the Helm chart can be quite complex, and the easiest way to support two deployment scenarios right now is to have two Helm charts. And that's not, the ideal scenario. So we then decided to start the Jaeger operator from scratch, using the operator SDK. And that was quite a good decision, when we look at the current viewpoint, because we can hide all those complexities into our operator and give people one YAML file with Jaeger semantics, something that people actually can understand in our terms. And it can be very simple. So this is the simplest scenario possible. So people just create a CR like this with GKV, with a name for the operator, in this case, simplest. And the operator will just assume some defaults, like the storage that is being used for a deployment like this one is the in-memory storage. And we use the all-in-one deployment strategy. So we have one pod, and everything runs from that pod, and we create, the ingresses, we create routes if we are running in OpenShift, and so on and so forth, but that's quite abstracted from the user. A more typical scenario would be something like this. So we specify the name, we specify that the strategy is production, so we have different pods for different components, and the storage being used here is Elasticsearch, that whose server can be found on this address here. Username and password is also defined there. Now, once we got into feature parity with the Kubernetes templates and OpenShift templates, we could start doing cooler stuff. Things like injecting a OpenShift OAuth proxy if people are running in OpenShift. Right? So this is something that we did not have in our templates, and it's something that we can detect at runtime. And people can actually disable that by specifying a flag here in the CR. They can just say, well, I do not want a sidecar there, or OAuth sidecar. But by default, we ship Jaeger with the UI secured when running in OpenShift. And then one other thing that we can do with Jaeger, with the Jaeger operator, is we allow people to specify an annotation there saying, I want a sidecar to be injected into my deployment, a Jaeger Jaeger agent as a sidecar. And our operator will listen to all the events related to deployments. And for the deployments with this annotation, we just add a new container to the pod. So that's what we have today. So that's our current state. In terms of roadmap, our next big task is moving from 007 to 010. There is quite a change, but I think we will manage. And then expand the sidecar injection. So right now we support only deployment pods, only deployments, and we want to support also other pod types like stateful sets and demo sets as well. And in the future, do more operations-like stuff, which is the actual purpose of having an operator, right? So one of the scenarios we have in mind is seamlessly updating the underlying Jaeger version. So if there's a new Jaeger version, patch, minor, or even major, we want to give the users the possibility of updating that automatically, because we're quite good at maintaining backwards compatibility, so it should not be a problem to update at least patch level update should not be a problem. And linked to that, we also want to do data migration. So we do provide already, for Cassandra, for instance, we do provide SQL files or CQL files that migrate data from older versions to newer versions. So we can just apply that by the operator. And in the process of developing the operator, we also got some questions. So those are the open questions, and we don't have good answers yet. So the first one is, type versus freeform configuration. So at one side we have a human, an operator that wants to pass an option to the binary, and in between the binary and the person, we have the operator, the Jaeger operator. So should the operator just relay the options from the user to the binary? And if the option is, a invalid one, then it will crash later, and the pod will be in a crash loop state. Or should we validate everything in the operator, meaning that the operator knows about all single options from the binary? And that kind of implies that we have to have a one-to-one version of the operator and the underlying Jaeger version. So this is something that we are discussing, and we don't have a good answer yet. So if you did discuss about that related to your operator, let us know and tell us what you decided. The second big topic is handling dependencies. Perhaps the biggest topic that we have right now, and it's in the context of Elasticsearch. So when deploying Jaeger for a production strategy, we need a backing storage, not a persistent backing storage, so not in memory. So we need the current default is Elasticsearch. So how do we make sure that there is an Elasticsearch when we start a Jaeger instance? Right, so an instance does not need to exist there when the operator runs, but if there is a CR coming in saying they want to use Elasticsearch, what should we do? Should the operator be aware of that? Should it perhaps provision Elasticsearch in the user's name? How to do that? And then finally is how to detect where we are running. So if you are running in OpenShift, there should be an easy way to detect that. Not only OpenShift, of course. I mean, if you're running in plain Kubernetes or in GKE and so on and so forth, it would be beneficial for us to know where we are running. So right now we have a command line interface flag where people specify the platform, and we just do platform-specific logic following that flag. But if we can detect this by default, we wouldn't require the user to pass this flag explicitly. So this is what I had. If you do have answers to those questions, I don't know how much time we have, but if we don't have time, do feel free to ping me. I'm on Gitter on the Jaeger tracing room. Feel free also to open questions, issues on the GitHub repo for the Jaeger operator. And I'm on Freenode on the Kiali channel as well. So feel free to reach out. Yeah, that was it.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions? I'll start with a few. For the first one, to go back to your question, your own question about platform-specific logic, have you thought about? At least we have thought about it a bit, but we don't have a generic way of doing it yet. Have you thought about probing for APIs and trying to adapt yourself depending on what APIs you find in the cluster?
That's a very nice suggestion. No, I have not tried that. So this is not pressing right now for us. I did open a thread on a mailing list on this topic, but when I opened, I just decided to implement the flag, the explicit flag, and move on. But this is a topic that I am coming back later because I think it provides better usability to the end user.
Yeah.
Probing for those APIs, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right? So install a route if there is a route available to be installed.
Yeah, it's a
But it,
problem that's recurring with a lot of other operators, and that's why like a common way of solving these things.
yeah,
Nice.
I think that that kind of, well, that could perhaps exist at the operator level, at the CDK level, because
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. And we're looking for good ways of implementing it. So any suggestion is of course welcome for the SDK or as other tools. Like both are would be good. Um, what about your handling of dependencies? Like you mentioned OLM. Would your next step be that you would need a very a good Elasticsearch operator to depend on? Like
yeah,
that is
that
that the case?
well, that would be awesome. That would solve a lot of my problems, I think. So there are actually two types of dependencies, right? So when creating those sites, I had other types of dependencies, but I realized that the dependency in other infra components is more important as a general topic. So the other type of dependency is when we have batch jobs that have to be finished before a pod is started, right? So in our concrete case, if somebody is using Cassandra as the backend storage, then we want to run a create schema batch job that will create all the tables, indexes, and so on and so forth. So this is one type of dependency, and we're currently solving that by using the wait all facility that the SDK provides. I think
Got
it
it.
could be managed easier. I think it's too verbose right now for us, but the job can be done. Now back to the infra level dependencies. Yeah, so having a production quality Elasticsearch operator would be awesome. One other thing to think about is, I think I hinted at before, so we don't need Elasticsearch when the operator starts. We need Elasticsearch when certain CRs come in. And when that happens, then we need an Elasticsearch to be ready to be used, right? So not only installed, but started already and available. And I think that's one thing that is not done yet in OLM, I think. It just starts the provisioning and then handles the control back to us. And when we start, it's not ready yet, right? Elasticsearch is not ready yet. So we start in a crash state and we stay there for a couple restarts.
Got it. Yeah, that's good feedback. I would suggest working with the OLM team on that. Maybe there's two specific problems. One of having other quality operators, and that's up on
Yeah.
that's for all of us in the community in general to be slowly building them so that we can start composing a bit more versus building. And then, but for the OLM one, yeah, I would definitely suggest reaching out and seeing if your pattern is something that is interesting to others.
Yeah. Awesome.
Right.
Yeah. So those were mainly my questions, and I mean, we have a lot of features to implement in for the Jaeger operator. There are quite a lot of scenarios like monitoring, scaling, but I mean, the Elasticsearch operator is something that we can also help with. So it is so important for us that we would eventually join their community as well and get our features also implemented there.
Great. All right. I don't have any more questions. I don't know if we have any more topics or questions, but I'll give everybody a few seconds to react to that one. Nope. All right. Well, we've had a very great conversation. Thank you, and presentation about Jaeger. I'm personally excited about this since it's a cool project. So thank you very much for your time, everyone. And once Diane is back, she'll help me get this recording onto YouTube. Thanks, everyone.